and he bought a ranch in Brazil, and he ended up living out his days very happy in Brazil. But yes, your story, Mike,
What a great story.
he was not happy with the Japan he came back to. You know, one of the things that I find interesting is when they found him, he had 500 rounds of ammo still.
Oh
Like,
my
geez,
God.
this dude was a careful shot.
And by the way, you got to keep them dry for all these years in the jungle. You got to keep your weapon functioning. I mean, an amazing case of survivalism. Welcome everyone to another episode of WTF History. This is the show where we go over some of the most amazing moments from history that make you say, wow, I can't believe that happened. My name is Mike Gatto. I'm your co-presenter, and I'm here with my lovely and talented co-host, David Quintana.
Thank you. I appreciate that intro.
So, David, today it's my understanding that we're doing holdouts. We're doing an episode on holdouts, unique military occurrences that spanned a long time, much longer than their peers. And you've got a really fascinating story that people today probably can't even fathom. Why don't you tell us about your story?
Yeah, I do, Mike, because people in that era were just built different than they are.
They were tougher.
They were tougher. They really were. I always like I forget which episode we had where we were like, yeah, he had 8 kids. He created a farm in the Nebraska territory. He ran for governor. He was a congressman, and then he died at the age of 33. Like,
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
You don't see that. You don't see that today, man. So I'm going to tell our friends today about the story of Hiroo Onoda. Hiroo Onoda was a second lieutenant in the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II. He was an intelligence officer. He was trained in guerrilla warfare. And I'll tell you what, that dude could follow an order. So he was dropped off in the Philippines. You know, Mike, I don't think people realize this. Do you know how many islands there are in the Philippines?
A ton.
Okay, can you be a little more specific?
That's
I'm
a term of art. I'm going to guess 556.
Yeah, there are 7,641 islands in the Philippines. Only 2,000 are named. So they have like 5,600 islands that aren't even named. By the way, that pales in comparison to Norway, which has over 250,000 islands. Like, I'm not like buy an island rich, but I'm like,
but in Norway, we both are buy an island rich.
Yeah, we're not buy an island rich. Like, after reading this, I'm reassessing that. So Onoda and another crew of folks, right? He was part of a group of infantrymen. He was a second lieutenant, but he was not in charge. They were dropped off on Lubang Island on 26 December 1944. So they were there as the war was ending. His orders were gather intel and under no circumstances surrender or take your own life.
Yes, and this is very, very important because he was essentially commanded to stay in place.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you know, even if things look dire, you cannot take your own life because you're part of this intelligence gathering thing. It was a great tradition, of course, in the Japanese armed forces. Rather than being captured, you would take your own life. But they told him not to. They said, stay alive, gather intel. And if I remember correctly, they also said, stay here until we come back for you. That was very important.
I didn't read that, but I'm assuming that's probably true since they told him not to take his own life. I will assume that's true. And, you know, interesting, it was so common with Japanese soldiers to take what they would consider the honorable way out by ending their own lives. When he actually surrendered, one of the things that he had with him was a dagger his mother had given to him. And the dagger his mother gave to him was for him to take his life if he needed to. That's how ingrained it was, right, into that military system under the Imperial Japanese Army. Again, something you could never imagine happening in today's military. I'm not saying it should, right? I'm just saying they were built different. So it's just amazing. So he went there with a squad of folks, but he actually wasn't happy with the squad of folks he was sent there with. He felt that they did not allow him to fully do what he was intended to do, which was gather intel. And he was also told to destroy airstrips, piers, food stocks, in addition to gather intel.
Yep, and so basically act as a saboteur, right?
Correct. That's right.
prepare havoc on the island because Japan might take it at some point strategically.
And he felt that the guys that he was there with were not following the orders correctly. Like they were too busy just trying to stay alive, right? But they outranked him, and so he could only do what he could do. And at a certain point, the other folks died off or left the island as the war was coming to an end, and they saw an opportunity and they split up. And Onoda and three others went up into the mountains of Lubang, one of the 7,642 island, 410 islands of Philippines. And they went up into the mountain jungles. And so what they did was they just, for almost 29 years, what he would do was he would come down onto the farms and he would burn rice stalks. He would kill livestock, right? He would just cause havoc, which was what he was ordered to do by his general when they sent him there with the orders, as you mentioned, Mike.
And it's my understanding, right, that the world had a little bit of a sense that this was a Japanese holdout because, like he would do a raid on Filipino natives of the island and like they'd be like, who'd you see? Well, I saw a Japanese guy with Imperial Army regalia and the caliber of the weaponry matched Japanese weaponry, and he sort of became a legend, right?
He did. He wasn't alone though. So he had three guys with. I will get to that. I'm going to address that directly. He had three people with him. One of them died, or one of them surrendered in 1950. He broke off and surrendered.
Only 5 years after the war ended.
Yeah,
only 5 years.
What a piece. And then one was killed in 1954, and then one held out with him until 1972, and then he was killed by a search party. Which I find very ironic, right?
Sure.
The worst way to be found by a search party is to be killed by them, and he managed to do it. And so that was the third one. So for the last 2 years, Onoda was completely by himself. And so he did what he was supposed to do. So you're right. Over these years, he had become like a urban legend because he was really good at what he did. Very, very good at living off the land. He survived off of coconuts.
Hold on. He had a protein source. What was his protein source?
Monkeys?
Frogs.
I know he ate monkeys, but frogs?
Yeah, he ate frogs.
Yeah, and coconuts.
Stolen
rice.
Stolen rice.
He could live. He had little huts, grass huts, up in the jungles. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a place like the Philippines. I have. Yeah, that's not a pleasant place, a mountain jungle in the Philippines. So, and occasionally they would steal a cow. And so he became, as you said, Mike, he was kind of an urban legend that people would say, hey, we think we saw this like old Japanese soldier guy shooting at us. And they're like, oh, shut up. And like, no, dude, I'm serious. So it was almost like Bigfoot, right? It was almost kind of like Bigfoot.
And am I also correct that he saw planes flying over? And during the early days, he assumed that this was like the Japanese relief force.
Yeah, no. Well, no, what he did is they actually dropped leaflets saying, hey, the Japanese, as part of the surrender, they dropped leaflets in all these places where they had people. And they said, hey, the war is over. Please proceed to blank, 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 right? And he thought it was fake. He's like, no, it's fake.
And I'm also correct that at some point they stole a radio and they heard like a broadcast that said Japanese ball players, it's like 1955, like Japanese baseball players showed up to the American World Series in Brooklyn and they played and and he's like, this is propaganda. This would never happen. Flying across the Pacific, playing ball together.
Dude, everything like that he said was propaganda. One thing that didn't help though, Mike, was that the island is located near a Philippine air base, which they would practice, which they had planes coming and going, right?
So he heard straight. Oh my God, the poor guy. He assumes the battles are still going on.
Yeah, so kind of he would assume that, or they would assume the battles were still going on, right? And then they'd see the leaflets and they're like, yeah, nice try, buddy.
Oh my God.
So at a certain point in time, they realized that it was him, right? That he was one of the people that had been left there. So they had his brother come out, and his brother sang a song, which he and Onoda used to sing when they were kids. But at one point, his brother, who was very sad, his voice broke, right, on the loudspeaker. And Onoda's like, fake!
Oh my God.
I'm not falling for this shit.
Oh my God.
So he stayed for another 15 years.
Oh my God.
Um, so finally, there is a Japanese adventurer, formerly, he's dead now, named Norio Suzuki. Norio Suzuki was a Japanese about town adventure guy,
What we
right?
would
Probably
call a
had watched
hipster now,
commercials.
right? Like
Huh?
kind of a hipster, kind of a hipster.
Yeah, right. For that time. Yeah, in the
Yeah.
early 70s, like an early 70s hipster. It's like, hey, I'm gonna do this. And so his thing was I'm gonna find a panda, I'm gonna find Hiroo Onoda, and I'm gonna find a Yeti. And
That's
so
right.
that was his thing.
And he
So
got 2 out of 3, right?
yeah, right. So he actually, and he died trying to find the Yeti, by the way.
Crazy.
So he went out to Lubang and he went to the jungles and he searched around for 4 days and he found him. And he told him, "Look, man, I'm Norio Suzuki, bro. I'm from Japan. We're good. Like this is over." And he's like, "I do not believe you, and I'm under orders. And I was told not to leave until I've been ordered to do so.
Yeah.
So unless you can find my commander, right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay here."
And this is the greatest part of the story, right? Is they had to go like find his commanding officer, right? An old
They
man at
did.
this point.
They found him, Yoshimi Taniguchi. He was still alive, and he
Yes.
was working. You know, thank God it was Japan where people lived to like 150.
Right.
Like, if it would have been like, you know, I don't know, whatever. It would have been like Honduras. You know, they would have been a little more trouble. But thankfully it was Japan. The guy was still alive, and of course, on brand, working. He was working in a bookstore. And they found him and they're like, "Dude, your guy Hiroo Onoda is still there. We ran into him, but you need to come. You need to give an order." And so the guy's like, you know, he's probably shelving books, and he's like, "Are you kidding me?" And so the Japanese government they flew Taniguchi back to the Philippines along with Suzuki, right? Because Suzuki had created a relationship with him, and they marched into the jungle, and he gave an order, a 3-part order that he had written out under his name and rank, and it was to cease all combat activities and return to home. And only at that time, did he only in March 1974? Only in March of 1974 did he finally say, "Yes, I am relieved." And then on the 11th of March, he had a formal surrender ceremony with President Marcos of the Philippines.
And you think about, right, like just, I mean, it's so amazing that he was given an order, wreak havoc, stay put, we'll come get you, and he did for almost 30 years. But then you think about that he had sacrificed all of the flower of his manhood in his youth, right? He probably went away at age, 18 and came back at 48 or 50. He had missed the moon landing. He missed, Japan's rise into this industrial powerhouse. Wait, America's buying Datsuns? What? Like,
right.
I mean, like, you think about what a changed world he came back. In my understanding, there's a little bit of a story about that too.
There is,
right?
because he came back to Japan, right? And he was treated like a hero. And he hated it. He hated the Japan he came back to.
He thought they were too soft.
They were weak.
Yes.
They were weak. And so he tried to create these adventures for young Japanese children where he would teach them these survival skills and how to be men, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, like, who wouldn't want to learn how to make a poison dart with your pinky and shoot a frog and eat it raw? Like,
right, catch a monkey with your shoelace,
right.
Which was the name of my second album. But so he found it weak. He found that the Japanese society had become soft. The emperor that he left under was a deity, and now they had like an elected president. So then of course he hated all the lights and all the noise of Tokyo. Because remember when he left, it was a very different Japan. It looked very different. The architecture was very different. And he didn't like it at all. And so he tried to give it a go. And then at the end of the day, he ended up moving to Brazil and bought a ranch. Because he was given back pay, by the way, for 29 years.
Wow.
So he went and he bought a ranch in Brazil. And he ended up living out his days very happy in Brazil. But yes, your story, Mike.
What a great story.
He was not happy with the Japan he came back to. One of the things that I find interesting is when they found him, he had 500 rounds of ammo still.
Oh my God.
This dude was a careful shot.
And by the way, you got to keep them dry for all these years in the jungle. You got to keep your weapon functioning. I mean, an amazing case of survivalism. Just amazing what the human spirit could do. And, just amazing. I mean, I don't know what else you can say about that.
You really can. You really can. I mean, we could probably go down a rabbit hole of how society's changed, but that's probably
now. And there has been a movie made about this. I will say that I watched a movie about this. I want to say it was Japanese made. I could be wrong, but a really fascinating movie, and they portrayed the story very accurately. And I thought it was a very touching movie for what it's worth.
Hey, do you know another thing is, and I think this is important because this helped them go, is that every night he would polish his sword. He kept his sword polished. And if you see the pictures that we have of him when he's coming out of the jungle, look, dude, I have a shirt for 3 months and it's already like, it's threadbare.
Yeah.
Buttons are falling off. This guy was in the jungle for almost 30 years and his uniform looks, I mean, yeah, it's a little worse for wear, but it doesn't look like he's been wearing it every single day and night for 30 years. You know what I mean? So
and one of the most amazing things they portray in the movie is after the last guy died, like you said, he got shot by, he fell into a deep depression because now he was alone, right? For all these years he had, I mean, this guy was like his best friend in the whole world, the only other human he could talk to, right? Like, just think about that. For the last several years, this guy was all by himself. Just amazing story of human resilience.
Now, what do you got, Mike?
Well, speaking of holdouts and military holdouts, and, like you like to say, being true to brand, I've got a Roman story for you.
Oh, geez, here we go.
And it also involves a military holdout, but it's a really, really fascinating tale of one Roman legion, which is called the Legio 5 Macedonica, right? And this Roman legion really was just a fascinating story of a survivor, much like Mr. Onoda. Now, most viewers out there, of course, they know about the concept of military unit pride and a unit's heritage and consistency and like a sense of inheriting a great legacy that certain units have. I mean, one example, of course, would be like the 101st Airborne Division, or, even SEAL Team 6, where people are very, very well that they're very well aware that their exploits, that the unit has a traceable heritage, meaning that every member who lived through this really cool era for like the 101st Airborne, for example, not all of them retired after World War II. Some of them stayed in the service. They were lifelong career guys. They stayed in that unit. And so they were there to talk to the next generation and to train them and to offer their thoughts and to tell stories. And so some of these units, they have a traceable heritage that goes back, from World War II through Korea, through Vietnam, where there's been a consistency, right? Like there's been just a consistency. And a lot of these modern units, they have unbroken chains to the glorious exploits of the past. They even have unit insignias or banners that were used in their battles. And so there's a deep sense of heritage. Well, the Romans had such things too, right? Their traditions and heritages, their traditions and heritage, you could argue was even deeper, because the term of service in the Roman army was not 4 years like is typical in the United States. It was 20 to 25 years. So a lot of folks who joined the army at age 15 or 16, they stayed in for a long, long time until they were well into their late 30s, early 40s. And they could pass on to the next generation their exploits. A little bit of trivia, a little side thing worth noting is after you left the Roman army, after 20, 25 years, you would serve your time, you were basically ennobled. You were given a small farm. You were allowed to take a local bride. You got some great land and some great farmland, and you could retire at age 39 or 40 once you had done your service. So it was a very interesting thing. But anyway, okay, so this legion had an extraordinary heritage. Members of the Legio 5 Macedonica fought against Mark Antony. Okay, so people know that. They fought against Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and they fought against Mohammed's sons. I want that to sink in a little bit. It is the longest continually constituted military unit in the history of the world. So let's get into its WTF history. So the legion was first levied by Octavian Caesar, which of course was just the term for the future Emperor Augustus before he became the emperor. And he levied this legion, he created it, and they fought in the battles against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. But after, the Roman Empire was pacified and the civil wars ended, it was dispatched to Macedonia, where it got its nickname. And in AD 66, it was dispatched to Israel to quash the famous rebellion that was occurring at the time. And this is really fascinating because there's lots of artwork, lots of literature written about these battles that were fought then. And in Rome, you actually see a picture of Roman legionaries. It's on a column. I'm sorry, it's a carving on a column, and there is an image of Roman legionaries carrying away a menorah. And this is the time when it is perceived that Roman legions stole the Ark of the Covenant. Then the legion was sent to modern Romania to battle the Dacians, and many of them ended up settling in that legion or in that region. So the members of this unit, when they were given their land, they were settled in Romania, which was by then a very war-torn, very critical border region for the Roman Empire. And it is believed that the settlements of these legionaries is why the Romanians speak a Latin language to this day. And by the way, this legion's exploits in Israel have ramifications that last to this day. They were called back to Israel in about the year 132 for the Bar Kokhba revolt. And of course, this was Hadrian's awful battles in Israel at that time. And it was the Emperor Hadrian's expulsion of the Jewish people around this time that started the generations of the diaspora and really led to the Jewish people being without a homeland until 1948. So another really fascinating piece of history that this legion did. Then, and this is wild, the Legio 5 Macedonica starred in the movie Gladiator. And of course, we don't mean that they really starred in the movie Gladiator, but it was, that brutal opening scene where the legion was fighting the Marcomanni, a Germanic tribe in what is now Bavaria. This was also that legion. They were dispatched to Bavaria to battle the Marcomanni under Marcus Aurelius in the battle that's depicted in the opening scene of Gladiator. So they're restationed in Romania for much of the 3rd century. And, toward the end of the 3rd century in 296, they're actually sent to modern Iran, to Persia, where they actually defeated the Persians. And they were particularly close with the Emperor Aurelian, who persecuted many Christians with the help of these legions. And then eventually they're stationed in modern Bulgaria. And while they're stationed in modern Bulgaria, this is when the Western Empire is starting to crumble. Although it wasn't called that at the time, the Eastern Empire is being transformed into what we now call the Byzantine Empire. But this legion is just sitting there in Bulgaria. And watchers of the show know that we've talked about when was that exact moment when the Western or when the Roman Empire ceased to be Roman. Well, it's kind of during this time. During this general era, but at this point, you still have the Romans in Constantinople very much considering themselves, even though they had lost territory in the West, to be the Romans, a Roman government in exile, speaking Latin, and of course this legion still called itself a Roman legion and everything like that. And so we have fascinating notes in history books and Roman notes about this legion being relocated to Egypt in the 400s and 500s and still going strong. And this is the final last tantalizing thing about its whereabouts. In 636 AD, we have inscriptions from modern Lebanon that talks about how the Legio 5 Macedonica was called from Egypt, now up to modern Lebanon, to fight this mysterious new upstart force called the Muslims. This was the forces of the Rashidun Caliphate. These were Muhammad's relatives after he had just passed away, fighting for control of the Near East. And this legion was called to quell that uprising. So, if you're following this, and of course you are, you have a military unit that existed with continuity from the era of Augustus and the dawn of Christianity, the birth of Christ, to the dawn of Islam and the birth and the death of Mohammad, right? This legion had key battles against the 3 major monotheistic faiths, right? I mean, it persecuted Christians, it expelled the Jews from Israel, and it battled the Muslims for control of Egypt, which is just mind-blowing, right? It existed for 680 years, probably with this exact same eagles or standards, right? Roman legions had these standards, these eagles that they would carry in a battle, and they were often gilded or made of gold, and it probably for all its existence had the same standards because it didn't lose them until 636 AD. It existed during the entire history of the Western Roman Empire, well through the classical era into the dawn of the Middle Ages. This legion is, folks know that I'm not a big fan of the Emperor Heraclius, and this is, just one more thing that he screwed up, one more tradition that he lost, because it was under them that they disappear from the record. They were probably all killed in battles against the Islamic forces. It really was the Forrest Gump of Roman legions, right? It was there at so many key moments in history. And the fact, right, that we are, still watching movies about them today that features their key battles is really just shows what key moments of history are. So, while we talk about holdouts, I thought I would tell everybody about one of the greatest holdouts of all time.
That's an amazing story, Mike. That really is. And I like the Forrest Gump of Roman legions. That's one of your best lines. And of course, now that I know that you're an anti-Heraclite, it makes me see you in a different light.
I love it.
So this has been a great episode, man. We love spending time with you guys. Please subscribe, and give us a like, share us, give us a comment. If you disagree with Mike and his known opposition to Heracles, that's kind of, that's some bad stuff right there. Mike, you good?
I'm all good. Thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.